Okay, we just closed out the market for today, April 3rd, 2025. Of course, yesterday was Liberation Day, or the day that President Trump announced all of his reciprocal tariffs. And the market certainly was reacting pretty heavily to that day, a little bit more, I think, than a lot of people thought. And I believe it was because there were some things with those tariffs that were calculated that some weren't expecting. I listened to a couple of different economists today, and a lot of people were talking about how the calculation of the reciprocal tariff was a little confusing. There's some things added into some of these calculations, like value-added tax and things like that, that have kind of thrown it off a little bit. So economists are not necessarily for this. A lot of other, investors and financial advisors and everything are kind of down on the whole tariff idea. But as we know, President Trump does things in a pretty drastic way, a pretty fast way, in a negotiating way. And hopefully what's going to happen here is a lot of revising of this with these countries and with certain industries and things as we go along and do that. So today was a pretty bad day in the market, but I'm not going to go more into details about tariffs because, number one, I'm not an expert on tariffs. But what I did want to talk to you about is that how when a bad day happens in the stock market and you're a long-term investor, it really doesn't matter that much. Actually, what matters most is that you realize you do need to focus on decades and not days. And we do need to remember that oftentimes some of the best days to be in the market happen even just a couple days after some of the worst days. So you really don't want to play the guessing game. Long-term investing is a waiting game, not a guessing game. And I'm going to go through a couple charts here to just show you that. And hopefully this will give you a little bit of, reassurance that when a bad day like this happens, hey, it's going to be all right. You can see over time how it works. And you definitely do not want to miss that next best day. So let's take a look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average history, and I'll show you a few things in a couple of these charts here. All right, so we're going to look at the point drops in the Dow Jones and ranked, from worst. And on the worst side over here, number one, and the best up days over here. And the example really here has a lot to do with really what happened in March of 2020. This is probably just one of the greatest examples of how you just don't know what's going to happen. And this wasn't that long ago. So if you've been an investor for more than 5 years, you definitely remember this. But take a look at this, all these 2020s. So the top 8 or 9 here, worst drops in the Dow all happened in that March timeframe, but almost all the best days also happened in that March timeframe. So if you look at right here on March 9th, we had a negative 2,000 point drop, almost 7, close to 8% drop that day. And by the way, today I believe, let me check where we ended up here real quick. So we had the S&P ended up at a minus 268, down negative 473, and the Dow lost 1638, down negative 3.88%. Is where they ended. Is where the market ended up today. So if you think about that compared to where this stuff is, we're not even in close to that worst day range. So, but the point is, here's at March 9th. But look at this, March 10th. Over here, right here, happened to be, one of the top 10 best days. So the very next day, the market goes up, the Dow goes up, 1167. And then, we're going along, we're like, oh man, things are bad here in COVID. There's the 10th, and then we have the 11th, which isn't on here, and then the 12th, boom, drops 10% on the 12th. But number 2, worst day, and number 2, best day is right there the next day. So on the 13th, up 1985, almost up 10% the next day. Then we're going along, we have the 16th right here, which is number 1 ranked. And then on the 24th, not very many days later, we have the best day. So this is, March of 2020 is probably just the best example of how you don't jump out. And as soon as you do, there's people I know that they got out, they're like, oh, I'm so glad I'm out. And then the next day they're like, oh my gosh, why did I get out? And there's people that got out at the end of March who never got the recovery all the way through the end of the year. So it's really, really, really important to not try to guess, all right? So those are the point changes. Let's look at some of the percentage changes. That's a little bit different. Right here, you might be familiar with this. In October of 1987, what's known as Black Monday, that is the Dow lost 22% in that one day. So think about all the hysteria that's going on here today with the Dow down, what did I say, 3.88% or something, and it's like the world's ending. Well, can imagine if it was, 7 times that. I mean, it's this on Black Monday went down, 22%. So let's see where the next best day was after that, 1987. So here it is, 1021. So from 1019 to 1021 was the next best day in the Dow. And you can go through and look at some of these percentages as well. I think there's another, here's another bad day was 87.26. We didn't have another 87 after that, but there's another date I was going to point out. I believe it's a 2008. So here's 1013 was a really good day right there, 2008. And then 1015 was bad. And then 1028, we have another good day. So there's multiple time frames where you can see how some of the best days do happen, right after some of the worst days. So if today was a worst day that it's been for the year, of course, I'm not going to predict anything, and nobody knows really what's going to happen next, obviously. But there's a good chance that one of the best days that's going to fill up one of those, the next slot in one of those charts, is going to come sooner than later. So you just want to be careful not to go jumping out of the stock market, not to go jumping to cash or anything. You really need to remember to focus on decades, not days, to remember that long-term investing, the success of that is a waiting game, not a guessing game. You can control your asset allocation. You can control your expenses. You can buy index funds. You don't have to buy actively managed funds. And, just got to make sure that your financial plan, your goal is really solid so that when days like this happen, you can understand that, hey, my portfolio is designed to meet my goal and not to try to, get the best return every single day in the market and jump in and out and all that kind of stuff. That's just a loser's game, right? So anyway, I hope this helps you. We'll see how the rest of the week goes. Hopefully the tariff hysteria calms down a little bit, and we have a great rest of 2025. All right. Thanks for watching.